But as somebody who lived in California for well over 50 years and tried to build in California, never in LA. I'm not trying to say I was in LA, but I hear LA's worse, which is crazy. If we operate rebuilding LA under the old rules, it would be 10 years or more, I think, before most of the city is back. Alrighty, folks, we are so lucky that each and every week we get to talk to Mr. Lance Lambert from Resi Club Analytics. We are so lucky because he is housing. We get to ask him all kinds of questions. And today we are going to talk about what might be a small silver lining in the LA fires, what might be happening around deregulation with the new Trump administration, and probably most importantly, what the heck is going on with migrations? Because if you know where people are going, you can make some money. Lance, thanks for being here, buddy. How you doing?
Yeah, housing. Always so much going on.
Yeah, I thought one of the things that is interesting to think about kind of longer term is what might be a silver lining of the complete disaster that occurred in Southern California in LA. By last count, I think there was 50,000 structures, like homes destroyed, plenty of businesses. And, I've heard more than one person, including Biden, President Biden, talk about it looking like a bomb went off. So what that means is once the fires are out and the people are taken care of, there's going to be a need to build and probably build quickly. So I was curious, do you think we're going to have any innovation in building because of this? What do you think?
Well, I think there's a few things, which is on one side, you have what is probably the state that has been the most restrictive with building.
Probably? Yes. Yes.
And it comes on multiple fronts in terms of zoning to want only certain types of homes. It comes on the front of the environmental standards are some of the hardest and slow down the process. It comes on the fact that, with the builders themselves and the fees that they put on them, the municipalities really trying to, suck out so much of that, pot and get their hands into the cookie jar that, California has a problem in terms of, its housing stock has not stayed up with, demand. And, I think a part of the demand in California is there is a part that, there's been so much wealth generation, people have higher incomes, all of that is there. And of course, the desirability too, right? Me in the Midwest, anytime I go to California and especially Southern California in April, March, February, right?
Pretty nice, right?
Wow, this is a great place.
That would be the weather tax on display.
Yes. But then there is the other part of, these, regulations that California has put in front of builders and the zoning problems there.
Yeah, you and I talked about this years ago, but I tried to add an ADU, which was pre-approved, in California, and I was told that I had to do a site survey and that I was going to be out of pocket $50,000 with no promises that we would get an approval. And this is supposed to be for an approved ADU by the state. And I was like, forget you. I'll just leave it in, I'll just leave the dirt in the backyard. This regulations in California are crazy.
And so I think with so many homes burnt down and the fact that you have Los Angeles has already been a fairly tight market, right?
Yeah.
For the rental market, for the purchase market. And you can already see from some of these homes that's, changed their rents within 48 hours going up 60, 70%, right? Now we have seen like homes.com announce this week that they're trying to tamp down on it. But what that tells you is that the overall regional tailwinds in that market are pushing it tighter, right? With these homes being gone, right?
Yeah.
Because now all these people, there's less of that supply, and then these people need somewhere to live. And a lot of the people that are affected, a good number of them have money, right? And so there's, there is that pressure in the rental market and the purchase market there. And so I think with the all of this demand to rebuild there is going to push and put pressure on the political side, right? So I think they're going to be more open to trying different things, right? Trying innovations in home building, right? Trying to do regulations that are going to be easier on the builders.
Hmm.
Now, I think there will also be a little bit of a new regulation push there, but might not necessarily be bad. And it might just be also pushed by the builders and the home buyers themselves, which is trying to build homes that are more innovative in terms of like fire resistant stuff. Like you've seen some of the images out
I
there
have.
of some of the homes that made it, right? And it's crazy how close the homes next to them that burnt down, but because they have like, different types of roofing, different materials used, all of those things help to, save those structures. And I think the insurance companies will also play a role there as well, because it'll reduce their risk, right? And
Yeah, it's pretty wild to think about. I at this point I'm left hoping for some silver linings and some positive progress. But as somebody who lived in California for well over 50 years and tried to build in California, never in LA. I'm not trying to say I was in LA, but I hear LA's worse, which is crazy. If we operate rebuilding LA under the old rules, it would be 10 years or more, I think, before most of the city is back. I hope you're right, that politics get out of the way and they deregulate and they create some incentives, and maybe it all comes back in 4 or 5 years. I think that would be a great thing.
Yeah, it's definitely going to be. It's going to take time, right? And all of these pieces from it. You go. What was it? The camp. What was the fire a few years back?
Yeah, I don't remember camp. I don't remember, but it's okay.
Yeah, but it did create more pressure on the nearby communities, right? Prices went up, rents went up.
Yeah.
So there is going to be that tightness there. Do we want to switch to migration?
Yeah, let's do it. Let's switch over to migration. So let me change the view real quick. There you go.
Awesome. So I sent out this report last week, went out to all my members, free and pro, and it's looking at net migration by state over the past few years. And now it's important before we get into net migration. This is not total population change. This does not include deaths, births, international migration. This is just the number of people moving into your state, Americans, minus the Americans moving out of your state. So it's the net. So Texas was number one for net. It had 85,000 net. So that's everybody who moved in minus all the Americans who moved out, and that's the net. California had the biggest net decline, 239,000. So 239,000 more people moved out of California over the past year than moved in. And then it was like New York, Illinois, New Jersey, Massachusetts, and the ones who gained the most, Texas, North Carolina, South Carolina, Florida, Tennessee. This is not surprising to anybody who's followed migration for 15 years, 10 years, right? This has been the pattern. Now it doesn't necessarily mean that all these states that are minus are falling in population, because if, births and some of the,
migration.
There's also been a lot of illegal
immigration.
That's happened over the past 2.5 years. And so that's not included in this picture. But if you zoom out, while Sunbelt states like Texas and Florida continue to see positive net migration, it's far less than they saw during the pandemic boom. So in Florida, they had a net of 64,000 in 2024. In 2022, it was 314.
Wow.
In Texas, it was 222,000 in 22, and now it's 85. So there's been this very big deceleration there. And it's happened for a few different reasons. The first being that we've just seen a rollover of the work from home migration boom, right? Not as many people are fully remote now. More of them are hybrid. And so there's still work from home arbitrage, but it's more of, I work in New York City and I'm going to go buy deep into New Jersey, deep into Connecticut, where I would have never done a 5-day commute, but I'll do 1 or 2 days, right? That's where work from home arbitrage now is. And so it's created a donut effect and pushed up rents and prices further into the deep exurbs. But what you're seeing less of is I work in Seattle, my employer's here, I work for Amazon, and now I'm going to go buy in Boise, or I'm going to go buy in Austin, right?
Yeah.
So you've seen that pullback. The second part is the lock-in effect is having a big impact here.
Mm-hmm.
And a lot of the people who would have benefited financially from selling their home in Illinois or Connecticut and going to go buy in Texas or Florida, they no longer see that financial benefit because their existing mortgage payment is so much lower,
Right.
right?
Yeah.
Than,
Yeah.
than and or maybe it's even with the property tax benefits of some of these southern states and the fact they don't have income tax, that which has been a big tailwind for a long time for those states, it's watered down right now because of the lock-in effect, because those new monthly payments are higher with the rates, or higher than they otherwise would have been. So
Yeah, it's going to be wild. I mean, we're going to be saying this for years, right? The turnover rate's going to collapse. Average tenure is going to go from 8 years to 12 to 15 years, because there's a whole generation of home buyers and people who refied that have unreal, just ungodly low interest rates. So their cost of living in the home is lower than it will be anywhere else at any other time.
So on this map, I want you to look at 3 states. Look at New York, Illinois, California. So California in 2021, they lost almost 500,000 net Americans. New York, 300,000. Illinois, 114. So if we scroll up now and you go look at where we are now, yeah, they're still losing, but it's no longer close to 500. And in California, it's half of that. It's no longer 300 in New York. It's half of that. Illinois is half of that. It's still all falling, right? Net migration, but not what it was. And so what the lock-in effect has done here is that it's created an irony, which is the markets here that are still gaining are actually some of the softer housing markets. And many of the ones that are falling are many of the tightest. But the reason is, if you look underneath the surface, it's because the ones that are losing are not losing as much as they otherwise would have. And so the lock-in, it means there's less supply of new listings in those markets than there otherwise would have been.
Exactly.
And then the loss for the demand, because somebody who's locked in, who isn't buying, isn't selling, it means they're also a loss of a buyer, right? Because they're the
two transactions, exactly.
But the loss of the demand is in Florida, Texas, and the Sun Belt more so.
I love
And
this.
so it's created a weakening. And when you go from having, let's see here, 300,000 moving into Florida net to 64,000, what that means is your market now has to rely for home prices, have to rely more on local incomes versus all those deeper pocket of people who are moving in. And by the way, in Florida and Texas, home prices went up even more than many of those other markets up in, the Midwest, Northeast. And so there becomes more of a strain there. And then another big factor is, in states like California, Illinois, New York, they're not building as many homes, right? There's the regulation part. There's the fact they're built out more in terms of what can actually be zoned. But there's also the fact that those places have falling net migration. So builders aren't there. They're in the Sun Belt. But because the builders have seen a shift and a downshift in housing demand more in the Sun Belt, and they have that new construction supply that has to be sold. Builders, to continue to move it, they've done some of the net affordability adjustments, really the buy downs, right? That's where they do it. And that's pulled more of the attention of buyers who would have otherwise went to the existing market. So they're going to the new market, and it creates the cooling. So I think the big picture here that I wanted to show with this data is just to kind of help to fill in some of the pieces of what we're seeing in the inventory data, what we're seeing in the pricing data. And I also have this is going out to my pro members this weekend. And this is a net migration by year going back to 2005. Oh, wow. And if you go through here, you can really start to see some of the stories. So here's Florida, right? Florida has that huge boom during the pandemic, and then we've rolled over really hard, right? We're not negative, which is what happened to Florida during the bust. If I had more years here, you would see it even higher here, and then it rolls down sharply. Let me show Arizona. Same thing with Arizona. They had the big migration boom, rolled over hard. They are seeing a rollover here, which I will say that these rollovers are a cyclical pattern to keep in mind. I don't know if that means that there will be a recession out here, but or if it's just a normalization off of the COVID highs. But it is notable that it is still down in a lot of these migration destinations more than 16, 17, 18, right?
Right. Yep.
Here's Connecticut. I don't
Oh
know.
my goodness.
I don't know
Wow.
what happened there. Oh,
Yeah.
that's the COVID year.
Yeah. That's New Yorkers coming in. That's what that
Yeah,
is.
that's right. Wow, I thought it was an error in my data. That's what that is. Let's take a look at California. Um, yeah, yep.
See a trend? Is there a trend
Yeah.
there?
And so California, since before I started high school,
Yeah.
I started over here, graduated 2010. Pretty much my whole adult life, they've been negative net migration. But really, during COVID, wow, I mean that is a
That's
big.
1 million people in 3
Oh,
years.
one thing to keep in mind is that net migration is for the years. These are not calendar years. These are July to July.
Oh, July to July.
So,
Okay.
so
All right.
2020 would actually be much bigger, but because the data ends July, and the first few months of the pandemic, there was the lockdowns.
Yeah.
It wasn't really taken off until the second half of the year when we really saw it skyrocket. So
Crazy.
there is a bit of a lag and a weirdness in the data.
Can you take a look at Nevada? I'm just curious if it followed Arizona.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Not as the interesting thing there is they were really big the 2010s decade.
Yeah.
I would have actually thought they'd be higher over here.
Mhm.
I think one thing that probably has made it to where they didn't jump as much in 21, 22 is there was also some weakness in Las Vegas's job market.
Yeah. Of course. Of course.
There
Their
were
casinos will shut down for like 90 days or something crazy.
Yeah, so you did see a lot more net migration from California, but because you might have seen some workers and stuff, their unemployment rate got to 25%.
It did. Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
and so I think that has that put a little bit of a lid on some of theirs. Look, I want to look at Idaho. There it is.
Wow. There it is.
Year over year for home prices, Boise in 2022 spring, 40%.
You know what would be interesting to me is if you took these numbers and then you had like it would be interesting for a year for me to figure out, and then you add in population. Like, because if you have a 50% growth on a state, or 50,000 people grow in a state, but the population's 500,000, that's very different than a 50,000 growth on a 3 million, population
Yes.
state.
So I have that too.
Oh, of course you do.
Yeah.
Wow.
Give me a second.
When we say housing, folks, Lance is that guy. He's got all the data, and he's very good at these charts, as you can clearly see.
I know I spend almost too much time on them, but hopefully over the years, as I've done more, I don't, it kind of gets a little easier as you build up the data. Whereas like this one, it was a new project, so I had to do it all from scratch. So this one is per capita.
Oh, there we go.
So it's per 1,000 residents.
Okay.
So what state do you want to look at?
Well, I want to look at South Carolina, because earlier you showed us South Carolina being in the top 5, but my guess was it was the smallest state of the 5. That's really where my question came from, right? Remember those first 5 things you showed us? Yeah.
Yep, I'm pulling it. Yeah. So let me get Florida so we can use it as a good proxy for it.
There you go.
Okay. So you'll see here when it defaulted back to Alabama.
It's all right.
Okay. So South Carolina, it's the highest in the country on a per capita basis right now.
Yep. That's what it would have been my guess based on your chart number 1. Yep. Okay.
Yeah. So, I mean, it's been there for a while. And so it's interesting that Florida has rolled over so hard, and South Carolina has not rolled over as much. Now, this rollover for California, that part of it, that's just coming out of the pandemic wave, right?
Yeah.
But I think the fact that Florida shifted down so hard, my theory here is that the cycle for migration for Florida has kind of gotten it some of the runway is short. It's shorter, right?
Yeah,
So the
of course.
affordability has gotten so squeezed there. And I think the fact that South Carolina coming out of the top of that work from home cycle hasn't came down as much. I think that what that tells you is there's a long runway for South
No, I
Carolina.
think that's exactly why I wanted to talk about this, because I think what you're also seeing is there were some people that moved to Florida initially. Like this is what I hear from folks on the East Coast, right? You grew up in New York or Massachusetts or Connecticut, and you saw the pandemic as your chance to move out and get that Florida home. You went down to Florida. You realize you hate the humidity. You hate hurricanes. You hate this. You hate this. So what you do is you move north. You don't go back to New York or Massachusetts, but you go to South Carolina, which is kind of in between. So you get the best. That's why I think South Carolina's got years ahead.
Okay, they do have a state income tax though, which
It's going to be better than New York and
but
Massachusetts.
it's still coastal. A lot of
Correct.
the parts there,
Still
although
got water.
some of the ones that have grown more in South Carolina are some of the inland parts too. Tennessee, that's still pretty steady there.
Pretty steady,
rolling off the tops. One that I thought was interesting is Oregon. It looks like it's going California.
Oh goodness!
See that?
Yeah, that's pretty clear.
Yeah, that's
people having enough. That's what that is.
Well, let's check what upstate. Let's see what Washington is.
Ooh, there you go.
Okay, they saw the Oregon thing too. Still kind of popped up from the low there. We can check out some of these Midwest ones. Here's me, Ohio.
Wow,
long time. Net migration out. Now, some of it is with some of these states. So like net migration doesn't include deaths, right? So
correct.
Florida, they don't have the deaths factored in, and there's quite a bit because,
the older population. Yeah.
Yes. Whereas Ohio, once people have kind of, raised their kids, they've finished their career, a lot of people move down to Tennessee, move down to North Carolina, Florida from Ohio.
Yeah.
So that helps to drive some of it, but there's also the older industrial state effect.
Well, you know what? Let's go Louisiana. Let's see what's going on there.
Katrina, right here.
Yeah. Yep. Exactly.
Huge drop. I mean, that is huge.
Yeah. People went to Houston and
let's see what it is on the total. What's the total for? Wow, 181. Yeah. That's more than New York lost last year. And this is a small state.
Small state. Good point. On a percentage basis. Oof.
Yeah. Louisiana still have a net migration out. And this has been one of the weaker housing markets.
That's why I asked.
We didn't see as big of a run up in prices.
Yeah.
Having a little fun with these.
Yeah, it's fun. Again, folks, this data is available to you. Go to Resi Club Analytics. I believe this is part of the Pro membership, but well worth it. Go check it out.
Yeah. Now, this story anybody can get if you Google if you go to Resi Club, you can find it on the site. But net migration, net domestic migration, which states are gaining and losing, and you can go in here and you could get the maps, and you just click here. You'll find the interactives, and you can go through them and see the past like 5 or 6 years. And then if you scroll down further, you can get what I was showing, which is per capita. Now the bar charts, those will be for Pro members, and that'll be going out this weekend.
Folks, you got to get a part of this. If you have any interest in housing, he is the man. He's the guy to go to. Lance, we're so happy to have you hit back each and every week. All they have to do is go to ResiClubAnalytics.com and they get the free ones or the Pro membership, correct?
Yes. Thank you for having me, Zuber.
Thank you, buddy.